we have here today the top agronomist in the country. Alistair Beggs, a Category 1 golfer and member of Royal Liverpool, Rye and the Royal Ancient Golf Clubs. With a degree in biology, he is now an official agronomist to the R&A's Championship Committee, a role that Jim Arthur had for many years, and advised at the Muirfield Open this year. You might want to ask me about that later. A member of the STRI, the world's leading agronomist consultancy, and you've got on your chairs some bump from them, which should have been in your doggy bags, but got sent to the wrong place. He has a roll call of the very finest clubs that he advises, including Birkdale, Deal, Huntston, Rye, Littleston, Castle Stewart, Delamere, Le Touquet, Aldborough, Luffnham, Royal St David's, Notts, and here at Temple. I could go on, but you'll recognise already he has a client list of clubs that are going in the right direction with their agronomic running game policies. The SGRI have a programme of visits to over 500 courses every year to help measure performance of the greens. And there is no better person than Alistair to tell us about the state of the nation's courses.
Lorne, thank you very much for those kind words. Before I say anything, I should thank Temple Golf Club, Keith, Malcolm for all his hard work over many years, and of course Martin, who presented the golf course for us today, which we all, I hope, thoroughly enjoyed. I certainly did. My golf wasn't very good, but thoroughly enjoyed the experience of playing Temple for the first time. But let's come back to the battle for fine grasses. And I should probably start by saying I've had an interest in grass and soils since the age of 14. So that's, what, 30-something years now. I was one of those annoying juniors that sort of went round the putting green all day when I was 13, 14, 15 years old and played the golf course three times a day. You wouldn't know it looking at my golf swing now. But I was fortunate enough to grow up and start playing golf at the seaside at Hoylake. And one day I'd come off the putting green, wandered into the bar there, and there was a gentleman in the corner holding court with about 5 or 6 club officials. And this chap was talking about soils, and he was talking about grass, and he was talking about golf balls rolling over the turf. And I cast an ear to one side, and I thought, this is fascinating stuff. And I listened from afar. And that gentleman turned out to be Jim Arthur. And following, having listened to him and listened to the people that were listening to him, that sort of perked up my interest in agronomy. And I went to university, got a biology degree, continued playing golf. And I was in a wonderful position after that to be able to marry those two things together. And I've been fortunate to work all over the world and work with some fantastic people on some fantastic golf courses. I suppose as a consequence of growing up by the seaside, I've always had an interest in the finer grasses, the Benson, the fescues, and also, an interest in the power annua side of things and the contrast between the two methodologies really that polarize the greenkeeping industry in this country. But not only polarize the greenkeeping industry in this country, they polarize the greenkeeping industry across the world. I was fortunate enough to spend some time in Australia in the spring, and even out there, that debate rages. Maybe with slightly different grasses, but the whole POA thing and controlling POA and managing POA or not managing POA, as the case may be, it's a big issue throughout the globe. So what we're trying to do in the UK and what we're trying to do around the world, I guess, the way the global economy is now, is produce golf courses, good surfaces, sustainable surfaces at reasonable cost. And that's really what the fine grass product is all about. Some of the modern designs that I now see on the television and around the world are in conflict with the fine grass game. There's no use producing bent or fescue dominated surfaces on new golf courses if they're fronted by bunkers or lakes and we've got to hit 3 irons over them. Firm surfaces don't work in those circumstances. But of course firm surfaces form the fabric of the game in the UK. The way we started playing the game in the 1700s was based on bumping the ball along the ground on firm running turf. And most of us want to try and do the same thing today. There are some that don't, and that's fine, and that's what the debate's all about. But we now have proof. We have objective data from 7,000 or 8,000 golf greens in the UK that we've taken over the last 7 or 8 years with objective tools that we've developed at the STRI with the help of the RNA and Sheffield University. We can now prove statistically that bent and fescue greens perform better than poor annua greens do. With the trueness meter that we have, which measures smoothness and trueness. Smoothness is the vertical deflection of a golf ball as it runs across a putting surface. Trueness is the lateral deflection imparted upon the ball as it runs across a putting surface. We can prove that bent and fescue greens are smoother and truer most of the time than poor annua greens are. It's quite possible to get poor annua greens smooth, but it's very, very difficult to get poor annua greens true. And that essentially means a ball might roll without bobbling on a poa green, a high-end poa green, but there is always tracking lateral deflection of the ball when it's running across a poa surface. And let's ask the pros. A lot of the pros do not like playing golf on poa annua dominated surfaces. There are a number of tournaments where the pros have come out and said that they don't like playing at that particular venue because of the turf on the greens. And I've had personal experience of talking to some of the top professionals at the Open about the grasses that they play on and their preferences. And a great gentleman, Tom Lehman, who's a former Open champion, he always comes out the Tuesday before the Open starts with his caddy. His caddy's doing the measuring things, and Tom comes out with one club. And this happens at sort of 7 or 8 o'clock at night when there's nobody there. And we're there out there testing the greens. And I've got to know Tom Lehman. I don't know Tom Lehman well, but I've got to meet him for over 4 or 5 years now. And he came up to me at Turnberry in 2009, before the Open. And he said to me, why is it that British golf greens perform so well throughout the day compared to greens that I put on in the US? He says, it doesn't matter where I go in the US. If I've got an afternoon tee time, the greens are no good. He said, if it's the northern US and we're putting on annual meadowgrass, it grows and it seeds up, and the greens aren't very good in the afternoon. If we're playing on creeping bentgrass greens in Arizona or somewhere else in the States, he said they pluck and they don't putt very well in the afternoon. But when I come here to the Open Championship, if I have an afternoon tee time, then pretty much the greens are as good in the afternoon as they are in the morning. And we've proved that as well. Again, with our trueness meter, we can run the trueness meter over the greens at the Open Championship in the morning. We can run the same meter over them in the afternoon after 156 golfers have gone through the turf. And the turf stands up very, very well. There are not significant differences between morning and afternoon performance of the turf. We only get that from the grass mixes that we encourage through our traditional greenkeeping in the UK. So it is a battle. The battle will continue. There are those out there that advocate poa annua and cutting at 2 mil and plenty of sand top dressing. There are those that advocate bents and fescues. And hopefully we'll get 1 or 2 questions about the polarization of greenkeeping and the growing of those grasses. One of the things that does frustrate me in my job is club politics, and I think the structure of committees and green committees at golf clubs does tend to restrict the progress that we can make. There's a lot of expertise out there, particularly on the greenkeeping front now. Greenkeeping education has never been better than it is at the moment. And there is a lot of sort of technical ability out there, a lot of good guys doing good jobs. But a lot of that is often frustrated by club politics, by committees breaking down, committees changing. And what clubs really need is a direction and a strategy, and then the ability to stick to that without changing and yo-yoing from one extreme to another. Don't quite know how we solve that. Jim Arthur's suggestion was that green committees should be comprised of an odd number, and 3 was too many. Maybe we should go back to that. Finally, to the media issue, I'm no media person. I don't know the first thing about media, but it does frustrate me a little bit that greenkeeping doesn't perhaps get the media exposure that it deserves, and particularly at the Open Championship, where the BBC do have a lot of airtime. We get a little bit of interest. I had a little bit of interest this year from Radio 5 Live, and had quite a lot of interest last year from Open Golf TV that do the internal tubing of behind-the-scenes type information, which people who attend the Open and sit in the tents do get access to. It would be nice to get some more coverage and more exposure about not only about what we do, but certainly about what the greenkeeping teams do when Open Championship golf courses are prepared. So that's really all I've got to say. I would very much welcome any questions that you may have on greenkeeping and grass and soils. And thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. Thank you very much.
Chris Green, Luffenham Heath. Just to get the ball rolling, so to speak, if I can ask Alistair, I mean, this seems like a naive question, but just straightforwardly, if there is now the proof that Benton Fescue greens are significantly better in terms of smoothness and trueness, and that's not controversial, I wonder what the barriers are. You haven't mentioned price, and I don't know if finances come into into this issue about what golf courses should be doing. And you have mentioned the politics and whatnot around the clubs and the Greens committees, but I'm just curious if there is sufficient and substantial proof. Frankly, what's the problem? What's the hold-up?
There are a lot of myths around this as well, but the perception is that to change from a POA-dominated product to a Bent Fescue-dominated product is a very, very painful process. Now, I'm not pretending that it's not painful, but it's a worthwhile process. It's a process that can take place. Admittedly, it takes some time, but it will provide a lot of advantages down the road. The Bent Fescue model, the traditional grass model, is cheaper and more sustainable than the POA model. But there are a lot of clubs now, a lot of big clubs in the UK. And let's not beat about the bush, you know, that they're there. But to get them to change their philosophy completely is a difficult task. It's a real challenge. And there have got to be, I always say to clubs, if you're going to have success on this front, then there need to be a number of people at different levels that buy in to the strategy. The greenkeeper's got to buy in first of all. We can help with that process. We can bond the team together. I can't do it by myself. I'm only as good as the greenkeepers that I work with and the committees that I work with. But you've got to get the greenkeeper to buy in. You've got to get a team ethic developed. And you've then got to get a committee that are committed to driving that process forward. And there will be lots of detractors along the way. There'll be lots of sort of mud pies slung at those people. They've got to have thick skins. And they've got to be very, very strong and support the greenkeeper through the process. That's very, very important. Now, it breaks down at various points along the journey for some clubs. Some clubs come out the other end, and there are real success stories. And Nick and I were talking about one yesterday. So it can be done, but it's a difficult message to get out there because I think there are an awful lot of people that don't want to hear what we're saying. But we need to try and get the message across now, particularly with modern greenkeeping techniques, modern technology. The process is a lot easier and is a lot less painful than it was 20 years ago. And you know, yes, it takes some time, but if the process is managed properly, there needn't be too much in the way of heartache and pain. It can be done.
Can I just add to that? Huntston, as an example, always already said, wonderful greens, really fast and really receptive. You could bung the ball in there and stop it and then have a fast thing. Well, they were pure annua, and everybody said they were wonderful greens. But they died, and because they couldn't keep it like that, and they died. So in the last 5, 6, 7 years, Huntston's greens have completely turned round. And with Gordon Irvin's help and others, they are now 80% Benton Fescues, and they are just gorgeous. And you ask the club, there has been no disruption to the members playing. They have done it without lots of disturbance, and they've done it, and it's now, you know, back to a proper linksy game.